Welcome back to another Tim King reaction, adding a feature then and now. Because Tim is old. Sorry, Tim.
Hi everyone, it's me,
We just watched a video about ageism with him, so I was just joking.
Tim.
He's young.
Today I want to talk about adding a feature to a game back in the day compared to today. I almost called this why game development costs more,
I can see
but
exactly what he means. Yep.
I think that will attract a lot of angry attention. So, what I want to talk about is development costs. And I want to talk about it in the context of why adding a particular feature is harder to do today than it was 20, 30 years ago. I see a lot of people talking about game development and how it takes longer and it costs more, but they often get the underlying reasons wrong. Um, and sometimes I think they deliberately get it wrong because they're trying to promote an agenda or get clicks or views.
I see
And
that.
sometimes they just feel like insulting developers. So it's like, we're talking about how much it costs, and that'll get people riled up, and then they can be mad at developers.
Or
So I
they
just want to be
they
clear.
think that you're saying it to give an excuse as to why game prices are rising or something, or you're like, I don't know, you're licking the boots of the AAA corpos or something like that. And it's like, well, if that's what you want to think, sure, but the reality is that games cost a lot of money to make, not just for like inflation reasons, but also just for when you really start to granularly break down the cost of something that has a minimum expected bar of quality depending on the genre and like your team size. And people will just make assumptions about the quality that your game should have if they realize that your team size is like 30 people versus 3. And I mean, I could say that I'm guilty of doing this too. I will give way more passes to a team of 3 people than a team of 30. I don't know. It's just game development's expensive. Let's just put it that way.
Costs, and that'll get people riled up, and then they can be mad at developers. So I just want to be clear. This video is not about economics. It's not about inflation. It's not about
Okay.
marketing and distribution costs. It's about purely development costs. And it's also for people who want to understand why those development costs have gone up. I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to justify it, but I'm going to explain it. So going forward, you will have an understanding of why making a game in the 2020s costs more than developing a game in the 80s and 90s. First, let me explain it at a high level, and then I promise I will give an example and walk through it in detail so everyone
Awesome.
can chew
Okay.
on it. Here's the high level explanation of why development costs have gone up. Back in my day, one person did everything. You had an idea, you did everything to put it in the game. Now, it's a pipeline. There. That is the entire explanation at a high level. It does explain everything because pipelines make things more expensive and longer. But now I'll explain why, and I'll give you an example. And the example I picked was something that I watched happen in Fallout in the 90s and the Outer Worlds in the late 2010s. So these were separated by more than 20 years. And that thing is, someone had an idea where they wanted to add a quest.
Okay.
And the quest was some NPC on one map wanted to tell you about another NPC on another map who had a really cool gun. And they would want to tell you, I think he'll sell it to you. And they tell you where the other NPC is. So it's a matter of putting both of those NPCs in along with the weapon.
Okay.
Back in the mid 90s in Fallout, one person could do all of that. And I will walk you through exactly what it did. First, I'd add the first NPC to an existing map. Maybe, put somebody on a street somewhere just standing there. Trivial to do. We had NPCs you could pick by appearance. So it could be one of those loser guys, or it could be one of the
That's
guys
us.
standing around in spiky shoulder armor, or it could be somebody in the hub who kind of wore tattered looking clothing but wasn't a loser. You could just pick them and plop them down. Making a dialogue was trivial. There was a preset format to it. You could type it, you could get it put up very quickly. Very little to do with this person.
Here's the funny thing, because Tim has the experience of working at that time where that was the case. I don't have the benefit of understanding that in a professional degree, right? Of course, I've made my own games and I've had to do both of those things, but most of my experience is working in a professional setting where if you said that you were going to do that, oh my God, would your leads and bosses rightly be very upset with you because you didn't follow the proper pipelines. And those pipelines, as Tim is probably going to explain, are there for extremely good reasons, numerous reasons, and but of course, like he said, that bloats cost. Hey, Forrest, can you get some help with the material? Color multiply, add, and parameters are going to glow. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know materials. I do not know. But you can, if you go into our Discord and you paste the issue and ping Rex from the Microraptor group, he could probably help. Video games fall for marketing based on graphics for decades. Graphics, yeah, I think graphics are one of those. There's a lot of people that buy with their eyes, and the moment that your game looks like, if you have one person on your team or like a small team, and you have like a PS1 or PS2 looking game, nobody bats an eye. If you want to make a 30, if you have like 20 people on your team and it looks like that, people do question that, even if like your game is just supposed to have more systems and content and art was not the focus because that was your stylistic choice. So you have like one or two artists, but then like, multiple writers and quest designers because there's more content in the game than like some yeah, it's just, yeah, there's a lot of rhetoric. There's a lot of rhetoric that goes into the cost too, and fear of rhetoric.
And they just, hey, is it the first time they met you? Hey, I've got something to tell you. I know this guy with a gun on this other and this over in this other town. Blah blah, and that's it. When they see you again, they might say nothing, or they might just go, "Hey, did you ever get that gun?" And if you did, you could show it to them, and they go, "Oh, it's a nice gun, isn't it?"
Yep, that was
You
it.
could literally have that character and that dialogue knocked out in an hour or two. Then you go to the second NPC. So you load up that other map. Maybe you pick some alley or something, and the guy has told you, oh, he hangs out in an alley. You plop him down. You give him a very similar, whip up a dialogue, very easy to put him down to. And the dialogue where he talks about, yeah, I got this gun. You could check whatever you want to check. Does he like you? Are you offering money? Does he ask for more? You can put whatever you want in the dialogue. He might sell you the gun. Boom. Then you take the gun. You grab a gun from from already set different models we have. And we didn't have that many different ones because they weren't that detailed. Maybe you just grab an existing one and change its name and description. And then you change the stats a little, saying, oh, it fires really fast.
Yep.
That's why he liked this gun. Or maybe the clip chamber, it holds, 20% more bullets. That's why he's like, I really like this gun. I modified it myself. Trivial to do, just numbers in a editor, bam. You take that new item, you plop it in a chest, you put it next to him and you lock it. Then you create a key that you ID to that chest and you throw it in the guy's inventory. Guess what? You're done.
The first thing, like, the first thing my mind is thinking, because I know that this is about like scope and about the pipelines, and I'm like, okay, well, who's gonna test this? Who have we approved this? Is this going to cause too much content bloat in the act that this quest is in? Do we think that this quest is even fun because the player has to backtrack into an old map and walk a long distance between two NPCs? Are we going to see negative reviews and, from like journalists about this quest because it's just such an outlier, it's so bad? Do we have voice acting for this? Do we have all the localization done for it? Are there any sounds related to the things that you've added? The custom artwork for the new gun and key that you added. And it's just, again, I think you could listen to this quest description that Tim says, and for a small team in 2025, it could still be passable. But he's right. This was the norm back then, and people didn't bat an eye. And I think that, for better or worse, people's expectations have gone far, far up. Not even from just a graphical and fidelity standpoint, but also from just the quality of content within there. And even the most crappy quests in like modern RPGs are better than what he just described. Yet we would still look at those games and say this game has really crappy quests. So as expectations rise, and not just fidelity, but fidelity is certainly one of those factors. So too does the development need to match that expectation and remain consistent. And that consistency is often very key because those outlier negative experiences are going to be remembered and are going to be the ones that are talked about. If you have that one horrible backtracking escort quest where you have to you get through all 5 difficult maps and you rescue the princess, and now you have to have an escort quest to escort the princess back to the starting map. My lord, could you imagine that?
Done. Right then in Fallout, that provided all these different ways. You can hear about the guy, or you may stumble onto him. You may the first NPC may have told you, or you may have just found the guy. You can talk to him. He will check whatever he wants to do to sell it to you and pick a price based on his reaction to you or whatever. You can buy it from him. We already had like barter built in, so you can call things to do that. Boom, you have the gun. Or maybe you just kill him and take the key and unlock it. Or maybe you say, I don't want it. You come back and you sneak behind him and you pickpocket the key off him. Those are all systemic things that you can do without anyone having to check. Nothing. Guess what? You're done. I saw people do things like that in a few hours. Boom. Suddenly you have a new thing to do. You get a cool new weapon, and you're done. You can make them as the characters as funny or sarcastic or whatever, what you want. It's done. It's in. You're finished. Now let's talk about doing that exact same thing in a modern game. And I said how it's a pipeline of people needed to do all that. Let's walk through that. So you want to make a new NPC. You got to make their face, right? Because we're first person, and you will walk up and you will see their face. Yep. And there are so many options on making faces.
I think the first thing is just like, okay, what's your design for this? So you have to talk with the designer, the quest designer, the writer. You have to talk to the producer. Do we even have time for this? Because we have a milestone to deliver. And maybe we have time for the quest writer and for the level designer or whatever, but we don't have time for the character artist. And it's like, okay, are we gonna delete an old character to fit in this new one? Oh my god.
You want everyone to have the same face, and you wanted a lot of options anyway, so that when the player made their character, they could have a lot of options for their face. None of this happened in Fallout because it was an isometric game. You never even saw people's faces except for the few clay models we did. But everybody's got a face, so you got to do the face. Well, once you give the face and you decide a body and you decide all the different armor pieces that go on it, because there's a lot more options, because people want variety and they're seeing it in first person close up. You pick all that up and you put the person on the map. Oh wait, did you set up lighting for him? Because lighting is really important now. We didn't even have lighting like this in Fallout, but the lighting is really important. And when you talk to them, the lighting and the camera setup are super important, because are you seeing his face or her face, and are you seeing the right angle, and did you set the camera up? Because if there was something blocking them, or if there's something preventing a distance, like they're standing on the other side of a counter, or maybe they're behind bars or whatever, you want to make sure that camera doesn't get stuck. So you have to check all that. You have to make sure the lighting is right. If they're outside and there's day and night lighting, you got to make sure they look okay for all of those.
Also, you often have hardware budgetary limits, and therefore adding a new high detail character mesh is going to cause some issues for a certain scene. Or maybe you didn't care to think about the quest states and whether or not there's a version of this village that is destroyed and one that isn't, and which state of the quest are you in? Should this NPC show up during that? Again, we have to test that and bug fix it.
So just deciding where they're standing has suddenly become a huge set of decisions and variables you have to keep in mind. Oh, but don't forget, this modern games use voiceover on all this, so he's going to be VO'd. And let me just tell you, every narrative designer learns this. Writing dialogue to be read versus dialogue that you will hear as a voiceover are two separate skills and completely different ways of writing a character.
Man, I found that out with
Golden Chronicles. We ran into this in Fallout, where some of the characters we wrote really well, suddenly when we discovered they were going to get a clay head and they had to be spoken, had to be rewritten. So talk to a narrative designer. That's just a thing. Oh, but wait. Modern games are localized into a lot more languages, meaning
Yep.
there's going to be pipelines after you write that dialogue where they get marked as needing translation. So hope you never go back because this stuff gets locked early and then you're
Yep.
stuck. You can't change it unless you're willing to spend a lot of money. Oh, remember this is about development costs and time to go back and change those dialogues. Where it would have been trivial in Fallout to go, oh, the guy actually tells you he's in an alley, but we decided to move him into a back room. Oh, I'll go back to the first NPC and replace alley with back room. Oh, you won't be doing that in the modern game because we already sent that off for localization and VO and ugh.
Yep. And we mastered him to be talking in an alley, not a back room.
Basically there's just so many more logistical issues to think of, and I haven't even talked about the additional memory and CPU processing that is needed to get all the stuff working right.
Yep.
So there's optimization concerns and profiling, and people may come back to you and go, we have too many NPCs in this one area, or hey, we're going to have to make his face different because we're loading in too many different face parts or whatever. Who
Textures and
knows?
stuff. Yeah. Stuff like that.
So that's just because it's modern. I haven't even talked to you about the pipeline stuff. So let's talk to you what happens when a feature becomes something one person puts in to having a lot of people in a pipeline. I broke it down into 4 areas. It's just become a lot more complicated. And by complicated, I mean time. And by time, I mean money. So let's talk about communication overhead. Once it's not one person doing all of it, all those people that are in that pipeline have to talk to each other or at least have some form of communication. They need to know, what are the goals of this character? What's the intent? Is this somebody who can be killed? Are they supposed to be nice? Should they change price based on reaction? Are they part of a faction? Is there anything that would make this quest not be available anymore? They need to know these things for their part of the pipeline. This means at the minimum some documentation or some meetings or just literally talking to each other, which I told you it's really important. None of that was needed back then when it was one person. One person might go, idea, implementation, before lunch, done.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for better or worse, and I think there are pros and cons to this. Modern games are a lot more consistent with things. If the quests or the way that, like, let's say a certain system behaves, or the general way that quests resolve themselves is really good, then most quests are likely to follow that same consistency. But also that means that if they're like really bad, there might not be any standout positive quests just because of the way that the designers kind of set up their formula, right? And I think that it, positive and negative to each of these. But it all just leads into this pipeline of, first you need to decide what your pipeline is going to be and whether or not it's an efficient enough pipeline to actually build your entire game out. This is where, when I talk about like a vertical slice, I say that it is not just complete with the visual level of content that you expect to be in the rest of the game, but also you need to have all of your pipelines ready for the rest of production. And sometimes those pipelines may have to be slashed a bit, or they may not be as ready as you thought they were when you're jumping into making your alpha. All of these things matter, and just because there is often less ability to be as agile as you used to be able to be because one person could just throw that new thing in at the blink of an eye, then that exacerbates a lot of the problems and the trends that are occurring throughout production. If the trend is generally positive, it's going to be harder to pull away from that, but if the trend is generally negative, it could be harder to pull away from that too.
Can happen. The communication overhead when a lot of people are involved is way higher.
Yes, it is.
Oh, but now that there's people, you have to deal with scheduling and something I call scheduling offset. Because when person A in the pipeline finishes and hands it off to person B may not be ready to start that. They may have a ton of other things on their plate.
Yep. I mean, you're working in like an environment where you have sprints, and so it's like, okay, you finish this. We're not ready to implement that this sprint. That will be 2 sprints from now. So let's say like 2 weeks, or if you have 2-week sprints, that could be a month. And so the time that you might need for iteration is not even going to be for 2 to 4 weeks from now. And that's only after it is implemented and then QA test it to see if it's even working, and then somebody has to actually play test it at some point.
Can't start right away. So that next step, you don't want that to disappear. You don't want anyone to forget what's happening. It's not when person A finishes, it's not his job to remind B about it every week until they do it. So all this has to be tracked.
Yep.
So a producer has to be involved. In fact, a lot of producers have to be involved. Where you could have gotten away with one producer in the 90s, you're going to need 4, 5, or 6 producers now because there's
Mainly like he's talking like big AAA studios. A lot of like smaller AA or indie studios. Indie studios, you might have somebody wearing the producer hat or multiple people, especially if it's a really experienced team. Everybody might be doing a bit of production here and there. As you start to move up in team size, you'll probably want a dedicated producer, and maybe one is enough to handle the project, or you might have a dedicated one and then there's like a helper, an associate, a junior, whatever. And as you move up and up and up, you're working with multiple producers that are overseeing one feature, and then they are managed by a producer overseeing, like, let's say potentially even a level, or one portion of the game, one part of the game, and then they respond to the head producer because the studio is making two games at the same time. So you need somebody to manage the production teams on the higher level from there. And then the producers need to talk to your publisher and coordinate a whole bunch of different outsourcing studios and all these things. And like you said, it's just the overhead to managing these many things and these many teams is increasing the time and therefore the money, but it also just increases that delay, which is a really good thing to address too, in actually being able to get from start to end. And one small thing can balloon up in size. I think he talked about this, or no, this was actually something we talked about with the Carrie Patel video. She is, I think, now a creative director at Obsidian. But she had a talk about Mavericks and Martyrs and how if you try to approach a game's development in a big team, but as this maverick who's going to go out of their way to add in this new feature that they think is going to be amazing, then and subvert all of these pipelines and expectations, it actually just causes way more problems than you can ever think of. And Tim is going over these problems exactly right now. Imagine somebody jumping into the engine, adding these 2 new NPCs in this new quest without consulting anybody, and it does still happen. I promise you that person will get disciplined and or fired very quickly if they do that, willingly or knowingly. But yeah, it can cause a massive trickle down of costs and time. Even deleting something from a game can take weeks of work, and those weeks have to be scheduled.
Lots of these half-finished tasks that are waiting in the pipeline for the next person to be available to do it. And maybe you need a particular person with a specialization, so not anybody will do it. I probably should do a video on fungibility. But that's why we have schedules, and that's why you have issues with these tasks getting offset in time. All that has to be tracked. This hasn't even begun to talk about why some or all of the stages in that pipeline take so much longer than they used to. I mentioned it briefly, like an item back in Fallout. You have a ground item and an inventory item, and then what the weapon looks like, what the item looks like when you're wielding it. But those tend to be, a bunch of those tend to be made, and then you can reuse them for lots of items. Probably not for your 3D first-person game. It needs a new model for the ground, and maybe another one for the person holding it, and maybe a new 2D image to be used in your inventory. Maybe it's 3D, maybe it's
reloading animations if it's like some weapon or something, and then of course you'll have to localize all that too. And balloon.
Those will all be new because you want it to look different, because it's very visible. It's very high resolution. Lighting didn't exist in the early games. It exists in this one, and you're going to have to make sure it looks correct when the person is just standing there, and so you can see the person, so you can talk to the person, all that.
Or it has good UVs so that the shadows aren't messed up on it too. I mean, that as well. Like the meshing just has to be done correctly. And like I said, like animations, different sounds for it, because you might have been able to reuse sounds for all light weapons in earlier games, but nowadays reusing sounds like that just isn't really going to fly for a larger studio because people expect, oh, this studio has enough money to afford to do this, so therefore the expectation is that they will do it. And if they don't do it, then the expectations were met. So it kind of just, I've talked about this before, but the expectations of the players are kind of forcing developers to one up that so that they can defy expectations in a positive way. But then the expectations go up, and it's just this never ending rat race to keep making better and better and better games until, as we see now, the AAA industry is kind of imploding because of the budgets have gotten way too big. But now, if a AAA studio tried to make a smaller game, would people actually accept it? I don't know. I don't think so.
Lower resolution basically meant you could get a lot of reuse of models and textures and riggings and things like that. Can't do that in modern games. People notice because it's first person, it's high resolution, the distance to the camera is closer. And that applies to almost every stage in the pipeline. Let's talk about bug fixing. Newer games, all that complexity, guess what? More bugs, more time, more money. You just can't avoid it. Worse, once there's a pipeline involved and you have to fix and a bug is detected, well, who made that bug? When it was one person who did the whole thing, you could go, Bob, your quest is broken. Here you go. But now there's a pipeline of people. Who broke it? I don't know. Often you have to get a programmer just to find out where it's broken, which takes down a programmer who may have had nothing to do. There was no programming involved in making this.
You have to schedule it too. You have to schedule, like, it goes to QA. QA will do rigorous testing on it. They will provide the information because it does assist to lower the amount of time needed to identify where it might be the root cause. But then it has to actually be scheduled that this bug is going to be fixed in this sprint, or it's taking whenever there's free time, if there's free time. And then after it gets fixed, it needs to go back to QA for retesting. And if it's something that is like really big or important, it might be added to the pipeline for testing before a new build is made, right? Like if you had an issue with save files corrupting, well, now you should probably add this new thing to your pipeline before a new build is approved to check if this bug is still occurring, just to make sure, because save corruption is a really bad bug to have happen. And this again now exacerbates that time and of course that delay. And we've had to include the programming, the QA team, the producers, sometimes community managers too, if this was like public, and asking players to keep an eye on it to see if it's still causing an issue, because of course 5 QA testers are not going to find every single bug that exists in some massive systemic open world game that 100,000 players on launch are likely going to find, which is a kind of a good thing because they can just find those bugs a lot faster. But also it does mean that you're unlikely to find a game that is just bug free on launch in every way.
This simple quest about going to get this weapon, but you have to find a programmer to debug it and find out where the problem is, because that will determine who needs to fix it. Oh, but wait, it's a pipeline of people. Remember, pipeline means more people, longer development time. Maybe that person isn't available right now. Why? They got moved on to another project because what they do was considered done for this project, and they're only brought back in for bug fixing, and there's only a limited amount of time, and they only have 1 day a week where they're allowed to bug fix on this game.
I've been in a team that did
or maybe they're on vacation,
a lot of problems.
Or maybe they left the company, because remember, these take longer to make, so this is more likely to happen. Also, there's more people, so the probability of any one not being available is higher, and you'll hit it when there's a pipeline and there's more people. So there. I know I got very excited. This is why the same feature was faster and easier to do back then as compared to now. Short answer, pipelines. Longer answer, communication overhead, scheduling issues, longer stages at each stage in the pipeline, and then bug fixing. All those take longer and are more complicated in modern games.
I mean, I would even just add to that there are just more people involved with making games, especially at larger companies. I mean, you scroll the credits of any large AAA game, and it looks like it's the ending of Lord of the Rings. What is it like? You watch Lord of the Rings extended edition, and it's like what, 4 hours long? Yeah, but the movie itself is only 3.5 hours. It's another 30 minutes of watching just the credits. And this is the case for big. I mean, Obsidian just made Outer Worlds 2, right? Outer Worlds 2 credits. Here are the Outer Worlds 2's credits. It's 25 minutes long. I mean, here's just all the environment artists. It's just, this is the number of people that have to go into a game that and touch a game in some way, and they have to be paid for every hour that they are interacting with this game in some way. I mean, of course, maybe not like the development babies don't get paid, but then you have, voice actors and all these people. They get paid a lot. Voice acting is very, very expensive, extremely expensive. All the people at the outsourcing studios and the publishing studios, and there might be multiple publishing studios involved. All the localization studios and all the different languages in LQA that have to be done. It goes on and on. All the people making the music for the game, the orchestras have to be paid to make these. Wild. Absolutely wild.
Therefore, they take longer. Therefore, they cost more. I can't think of any easier way to put this. I hope this makes sense. Like I said, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying this is an explanation of why it's happening.
The reality.
Sure, people could make games like they made in the 90s. Nothing's stopping you from doing that. Oh, wait, I don't think people buy as many. The retro market just isn't as big.
It's true.
Anyway, again, not trying to justify it. That's your explanation of why it takes longer to put in a feature, and that's why games cost more.
He's right. Everything he said is right. I agree with it. It's just one of those unfortunate realities where games are a lot more complex and a lot more featureful and have a lot more content than they used to, and the level of polish on those features and pieces of content are much, much larger. Says a customer, but he's not saying they are better. No, this is true. This is true. But that's a matter of individual preference, right? Some people will say that modern games are better. Some will say that they're not. I don't know if we can get into discussion about modern or older games being better or worse generally, but we can say that that modern games are by and large more featureful, have more content, and do generally have more level of polish, options, and customization than older games. Hey CFG, wonder why GTA 6 got delayed, but they named a specific date. They name it for a few reasons. As a publicly traded company, they definitely are going to want to indicate to investors when that money is expected to come in. They are also signaling to the industry when to expect it, so that they can kind of do a little bit of due diligence and good faith to other developers to say, hey, we understand that our game is going to cause a bit of a kerfuffle in the industry. This is when you can expect it. If you want to, move your release date around for it, do so. They're indicating to retailers when to expect a big influx of people so that retailers can prepare for any physical parties or launch dates. They're indicating to the public when they can expect it, because people will take off work in order to play GTA 6. It's better all around to announce the release date, and it kind of shows that they have a plan, that it's not just, oh, we're canceling our release date and it'll be released whenever. It's saying, no, we need this much time to finish it, therefore we're asking for this much time, if that makes sense. I hope they 3x the estimate. we're gonna see. We're gonna see what happens with GTA 6. We're gonna be playing that on stream if we can. It's gonna be pretty exciting, but I think that the game is going to be significantly larger than anything they've made so far. 6 months. I thought it was like a. No, I thought it was. It's like a year. Yeah, no PC day one. Well, people will buy 2 copies. They tried it with GTA 5 and it worked. People bought 2 copies of. Actually, some people bought 3 copies because didn't they buy the PS3 or Xbox 360 version of it, and then they bought the upgraded version of it, and then they bought it again on PC. But hey, here's the link if you guys want to give this a like and subscribe. Please do give it a like and give Tim a subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, we'll catch you in the next one. Take care, YouTube.